I still remember the exact moment everything changed. It wasn't a fight, not even a raised voice. It was a single, quiet click, the sound of my own phone unlocking without my hand on it. I had come home early from work, hoping to surprise her, to catch her humming over coffee in the kitchen, maybe even steal a soft kiss. Instead, the glow from my phone screen painted the living room in cold, sterile blue light, and what I saw froze my heart mid-beat. Her name, Maya, flashed at the top of a message thread. But it wasn't a casual text exchange that made my stomach lurch. It was the words, intimate, sly, casual in their betrayal. Names I didn't recognize, plans whispered in secrecy, emojis that meant nothing but secrecy to anyone else. And the last message, timestamped 15 minutes ago. Can't wait for tonight. Just us. You know the place. My chest tightened, throat dry. I wanted to put the phone down, to tell myself I was imagining things, seeing ghosts and shadows. But I couldn't. The truth pressed against my ribcage, heavy and undeniable. I sank onto the edge of the couch, its fabric rough against my skin, the lavender-scented candle on the coffee table suddenly sour in the air. My mind raced through the months, replaying little oddities I had dismissed, late nights at work, unexplained perfume on her scarf, sly smiles when she thought I wasn't watching. I had excused them all. Trust, I told myself, trust keeps marriage alive. But now rationalization felt like denial, and denial was a luxury I could no longer afford. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to storm the apartment, but my body was paralyzed by the weight of knowing. My fingers shook as I scrolled, every line a revelation of a life I wasn't part of, every word a reminder that I was an outsider in my own home. She had a world beyond me, secret and vibrant, where I existed only as someone polite to return home to, someone to comfort her when no one else could. The memory of how we met assaulted me. Her laugh, her energy, the way she could make the coldest nights feel warm. And the intimacy was shared, the whispered fears, the dreams spoken under dim bedroom lights, now seemed like a cruel joke. Betrayal didn't just hurt. It shattered the foundation of every memory I had treasured. A knock at the door startled me. Heart hammering, I almost dropped the phone. It was a mail carrier, the mundane intrusion into a life that had just become unrecognizable. I signed for the package mechanically, my mind still on the thread, the messages, the betrayal. Closing the door, I felt a strange emptiness, a sharp edge of panic, as if stepping into a new world I hadn't chosen. I began pacing the living room, socks skimming the cold floorboards, the faint hum of traffic outside echoing my racing heartbeat. I wanted to call out, demand her presence, yet my throat constricted, words trapped between despair and fury. I felt a tremor in my hands, my jaw clench until it ached, each thought looping into another. Why? How long? Who? Then it hit me. The thread hinted at something bigger. It wasn't just one affair. It was a network, a club, maybe even an organized circle. Names, locations, coded references appeared, each one a breadcrumb revealing a hidden world she belonged to, a world from which I was excluded. My fingers dug into my hair, tugging at roots in frustration. I wanted proof, confrontation, vengeance, but I was terrified. What would confronting her unleash? What chaos lay behind those messages? I remembered the night before, how she kissed me softly, whispered words that now felt like lies. I had held her close, believing in warmth and love, oblivious to the secrets between us. Our apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, suffocating me with memories of trust violated. Every cushion, every photograph, every trinket she touched seemed to mock me. I checked the thread again, compulsively. The messages weren't just flirtation. They were deliberate, planning something I wasn't privy to. The place, they said. Where? What was happening tonight? Panic, rage, and heartbreak collided into a storm inside me. I imagined her smile, her laughter, the casual ease with which she hid these things from me. A cold fury settled in my chest. Not just sadness, rage, a visceral, consuming fire. I thought about confronting her. I imagined the words, sharp, precise. Who is he? How long? Why? But even as I rehearsed them, fear lingered. Fear of the unknown, of the consequences. The thread suggested more than one encounter, multiple participants. How deep did this go? How many nights had she spent weaving this double life while I slept beside her? Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. My thoughts twisted and knotted, each possibility darker than the last. I tried rationalizing, asking myself if there was an explanation. Maybe she was just messaging a friend, just a social game, nothing physical. But the tone, the intimacy, the planning, it screamed otherwise. My stomach churned, bile rising with every imagined scenario. Finally, I put the phone down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I had to act, but I had no idea where to begin. Part of me wanted to gather evidence, follow her, uncover the full scope. Another part wanted to confront her immediately, to demand truth, to make her see the wreckage she'd caused. But which action would serve justice, or sanity, or closure? And in that quiet, suffocating apartment, I realized the life I had thought I knew was gone. The trust, the intimacy, the shared plans, all had evaporated in a click. What remained was me, trembling, burning with fury, grief, and a need I didn't fully understand. Not just to confront, but to reclaim some sense of control, to take back my life from the shadows of betrayal. I didn't know how far I would go or what I would do next. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: everything had changed, and whatever came next would leave no part of us untouched. The next morning, I woke to sunlight slanting through the blinds, warm on my face, yet the warmth did nothing to thaw the icy pit in my stomach. Maya was already gone. Her side of the bed was cool and untouched, the sheets smooth as if no one had slept there. I lingered for a moment, watching the way the light fell across the room, and I felt an unfamiliar disconnection, as though I were a ghost in my own life. Breakfast was quiet. The coffee brewed, steam curling in thin ribbons that smelled faintly of bitterness, and I sat across from her, silently studying her. She moved as usual, humming softly, stretching with casual elegance, her hair falling in golden waves around her face. Everything about her seemed ordinary, even mundane. Yet I saw it differently now. Every movement, every smile, every glance toward the phone was suspicious, deliberate, hidden in plain sight. "Morning," she said, voice light, almost musical. Her eyes met mine, and for a fleeting second, a twinge of what I used to call love flickered in my chest. I had to push it away. "Morning," I muttered, my voice flat. She tilted her head. "You look tired. Late night at work." Her words were innocuous, but there was an undertone. Curiosity, maybe caution. Or was it guilt? I shook my head. "No, just—" I trailed off, unable to summon a lie that sounded convincing. I didn't want to accuse her yet. I wanted proof. I needed to understand the scope of whatever this was before detonating the fragile house of cards we lived in. She smiled softly, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "Well, don't overdo it. You look like you could use a day off." I nodded, letting her words wash over me, yet every syllable felt like a lie layered atop another lie. I drank my coffee in silence, the bitterness sharpening my resolve. I needed information. I needed to see clearly before deciding what to do next. The days stretched long, filled with routines that suddenly seemed hollow. Every sound became suspect: the hum of her laptop, the subtle vibrations of a phone. I caught myself imagining messages, planning secret meetings. I tried to focus on work, on the spreadsheets and calls that usually consumed me, but every ping of an email made my pulse spike. I remembered the thread I had seen. Names, times, coded phrases. A place mentioned repeatedly. The place. I didn't know what it was, or why she went there, or what happened there. And yet, the curiosity gnawed at me, stronger than any desire to confront her. Part of me was afraid. Yes, afraid of the truth. Afraid of what I might find. But another, darker part of me wanted to see everything laid bare. That evening, when she returned, the apartment smelled faintly of jasmine, her perfume, or someone else's. I didn't know, and the uncertainty was a new kind of torment. She greeted me with her usual warmth, yet I could detect a subtle shift, a hesitance in her smile, the quickening of her pulse in her neck when she laughed at something trivial. My mind catalogued every detail. I knew it could all be innocent, but I didn't trust innocence anymore. We ate dinner together, a ritual now tainted. The vegetables steamed, The roast smelled rich and comforting, but the act of sharing a meal felt performative, like watching actors mime a scene they had performed countless times before. Every bite I took was accompanied by an internal dialogue. Did she do this? Did she plan this with someone else? After dinner, I excused myself to the study, a place I usually avoided because it reminded me of shared nights spent working side by side. Tonight, though, I needed control. I needed information. My laptop was my ally. I pulled it close, fingers trembling, heart hammering. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, only that there had to be traces, emails, calendar entries, messages you forgot to delete. Hours passed, each minute heavy with tension. I was meticulous, cautious. Every click, every search was calculated, as if one wrong move could tip her off. It was in the folder marked miscellaneous that I found the first real clue. At first, it was a name, a contact saved under pseudonym. Then came messages, photos, details of gatherings I had never known about. Slowly, the picture emerged. She wasn't just seeing someone casually. She was part of something organized, something secretive. It was as if she had a second life, carefully curated, hidden from me. The photos were subtle, group dinners, private parties, masked events. People laughing, glasses raised, faces alight with excitement. Maya stood among them, central, confident, radiant, not ashamed, not hiding. In the photos, she looked alive in a way that seemed almost sinister when compared to her life with me. She wasn't ashamed of this other life. She was thriving in it. I felt bile rise in my throat. Rage and sorrow collided, mingling with a surreal detachment. It was one thing to imagine a betrayal. It was another to witness it in such vivid, undeniable clarity. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room, scream until my lungs gave out, yet I didn't. I couldn't. Something in me, the need to understand, the desire to reclaim control, kept me tethered. Days passed like this, a tense ballet of observation and avoidance. I watched her closely, noting patterns, behaviors, subtle shifts in mood. Every evening, she would leave at the same time, claiming errands or catching up with friends. But I noticed the way she tucked the phone into her purse, the little glances to see if I was watching, the quickened step as she left. One night, I followed her. From a distance, careful not to be seen, I watched her slip into a dimly lit club. Inside, the place was alive, music pulsing, people laughing, smoke curling in the air. She moved through it with ease, confident, laughing with strangers whose names I didn't know. I felt a strange cocktail of rage, jealousy, and disbelief. This was a world I had never known, a world she inhabited freely while I remained in the shadows. I returned home that night, empty and exhausted, mind spinning. The betrayal wasn't a single act. It was a lifestyle, a choice she had made without me. And yet, beneath the anger, beneath the hurt, was a seed of obsession, a need to understand fully before acting, a desire to know every detail, every name, every place. In that week of quiet observation, I began to feel something new, dangerous. The hurt, the anger, the betrayal, they became fuel for a plan that had begun forming in the dark corners of my mind. Revenge was no longer a distant thought. It was taking shape, slowly, meticulously, like a spider weaving a web. And the web would ensnare her. But I was patient. I had to be. Rushing would spoil everything. First, I had to gather proof, map her network, understand her world. Only then could I move. Only then could I confront her in a way that she would never forget. And so I waited, watched, recorded. Every smile, every step, every whisper became part of the map I was constructing in my mind. My life at home continued its uneasy masquerade of normalcy. I smiled, laughed, nodded, all while my inner world burned with secrets, suspicions, and a dark promise. She had no idea the storm that was coming. The following weekend, I decided to dig deeper. The laptop and phone had given me breadcrumbs, but I needed the full picture. I knew I was crossing a line, but the need to know, to see it all, overrode every shred of caution. I spent hours scrolling through emails, encrypted messages, private group chats. Each line, each photo, each casual exchange between Maya and others confirmed my worst fears. It wasn't just a secret relationship. It was a network, a clandestine circle where she thrived. Names repeated in messages, plans meticulously arranged, meetings held in hidden locations. Some names were strangers, others familiar, but in this hidden world, they all shared a bond one could not penetrate. The meticulousness was staggering, the ease with which she navigated it shocking. She wasn't hiding in shame. She was living openly within this secret, as if the life I knew with her was a mask she wore for my comfort. My hand shook as I stumbled upon a set of photographs tucked into a hidden folder labeled Memories. My heart raced before I even opened it, each breath heavy with dread. The photos were from one of the gatherings I had glimpsed in the club weeks ago. Maya stood at the center of a group, faces illuminated by dim chandeliers, laughter frozen mid-frame. She wore a mask of casual elegance, her body language relaxed, confident, every gesture deliberate. And then I saw him, a man I didn't know, lean, dark-haired, with a smile that sent a chill down my spine. He had his hand on her waist in one photo, brushing against her casually, as if claiming territory that I once thought was mine. They laughed together, sharing whispered words I couldn't hear, their eyes locked in a way that made my chest ache. My stomach churned, bowel rising, yet I couldn't look away. I found dozens of such photos, each one more damning than the last. Maya was not just attending these events. She was a key participant, sought after, engaged, thriving. It was a carefully curated existence, a parallel life I had been oblivious to, even as I lay beside her each night, dreaming of our future together. I felt hollow. Every memory we had shared, the quiet mornings, the long drives, the whispered confessions at night, suddenly felt like lies I had been complicit in believing. How could someone I loved, trusted, and built a life would lead such a double existence with such finesse? The betrayal was not a moment. It was a lifestyle, a deliberate choice she had made without me. I sank onto the couch, phone in hand, heart pounding. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air, sweet and suffocating. I pressed my face into my hands, feeling the weight of grief, anger, and disbelief pressing down. My mind raced, jumping between thoughts of confrontation, revenge, and the crushing question, why? Why would she do this? Why would she construct a life so carefully hidden, so completely removed from mine? Was I not enough? Had I failed her in some way I hadn't noticed? The questions looped endlessly, torturing me with no answers. I felt both victim and detective, love and hate coiled in equal measure inside me. Hours passed. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I barely moved. I sat there, staring at the photos, memorizing every detail. The curve of her smile, the tilt of her head, the way she rested her hand on his shoulder. Each detail a dagger, each frame a reminder of how expertly she had crafted this life without me. And yet, beneath the anger, beneath the devastation, a part of me awoke, something dark and deliberate. The betrayal had awakened a predator in me, a need to reclaim some semblance of control over a situation in which I felt utterly powerless. Revenge was no longer a thought. It was beginning to take form. The first step, I realized, was understanding the network fully. I needed names, locations, routines. I had to map every connection, understand her world as she had built it, and only then could I decide my next move. Each detail was a piece of a puzzle, and I became obsessed, meticulous, calculating. Late that night, I overheard her in the bedroom. She was on a call, whispering softly, words I couldn't catch. But the tone, light, intimate, almost flirtatious, confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't hiding her life out of fear of exposure. She was simply living it apart from me, confident I would never discover the depth of her duplicity. My pulse quickened, rage and sorrow intertwining. I wanted to confront her, demand answers, shake the truth from her lips. But I held back. I needed control. I needed precision. Acting in anger could ruin everything, could give her the upper hand. No, I would wait. I would watch. I would understand every aspect of this hidden world. Then I would move, and when I did, she would have no escape. The next day, I noticed subtle behaviors that had previously seemed innocuous. A glance at her watch before leaving, a whispered phrase as she locked the door, the careful placement of a bag to obscure its contents. I catalogued everything in my mind, each observation building a mental map of patterns, schedules, and secrets. I became both husband and detective, living in two realities simultaneously. One where I shared an apartment with a woman I loved, and another where I meticulously planned her exposure, revenge, and eventual reckoning. At night, I pored over the photos again, noting faces, patterns, and connections. I researched names, cross-referencing them with social media and other online traces. My obsession grew. Sleep became a memory. Meals became a ritual I barely observed, and every waking moment was consumed with piecing together the intricate tapestry of a hidden life. And yet, for all the anger, all the grief, I still felt love, twisted, poisoned, but undeniable. Love for someone who had betrayed me, for someone I wanted to hurt yet couldn't stop thinking about. The complexity of it terrified me, to hate and love at the same time, to desire justice yet crave understanding. I was trapped in a labyrinth of emotions, and the walls were closing in with every photo, every message, every whispered secret. By the end of the week, I had enough. Enough to know the truth, enough to confirm the betrayal, enough to understand the network, the people, the routines. She was not a single act of infidelity. She was a part of a hidden world, one I had been excluded from, one she navigated with grace and ease. The realization settled over me like ice. This was deliberate, calculated, and ongoing. I felt the first flicker of a plan ignite, a need for justice, for exposure, for reclaiming my life and dignity. The betrayal had wounded me deeply, but it had also sharpened my mind, honed my resolve. I was no longer a passive victim. I would not confront her blindly. I would not stumble. I would take control, piece by piece, until she understood exactly what it meant to betray me. And when that day came, I promised myself the reckoning would be absolute. I turned our apartment into a map, not the kind you hang on a wall with pins and string, but one stitched into the small rituals of my days, the time she left, the route she took, the cafes she favored on weekends, the faces I'd seen in photos attached to her messages. I catalogued everything in a private notebook, a cheap spiral pad I kept hidden beneath a stack of old magazines. Each entry was a cold fact: date, time, location, who was present, any peculiar phrases overheard. The more I wrote, the more the fog of betrayal cleared into rigid lines I could follow. Obsessive thinking had always been a trait I'd laughed off. Where others saw neurosis, I saw thoroughness. Now that thoroughness was a weapon. I stopped sleeping through the night. The world were quieter then, the city's noises replaced by the soft scratch of my pen as I transcribed the evidence the internet had given me into something tactile and real. Photos printed and slipped between pages. Screenshots annotated with arrows and notes. How a hand rested on a particular man's arm in the same way in 3 separate images. How a certain laugh pattern repeated across videos. The same tilt of the head, the same narrowed eyes. There were moral quicksands everywhere. I told myself I wasn't cruel. I was simply reclaiming truth. But truth is a thing that can be wielded like a blade, and the more I sharpened mine in the privacy of the study, the less I recognized the man holding it. I practiced my arguments aloud, not to anyone but to the hollow room. You betrayed me. Explain. Confess. Make it right. The rehearsals calmed me, though they also fed the darker parts of me that wanted to see the world burn in recompense. I stalk her patterns with the care of a man tracking a fox. Not physically raw pursuit at first, nothing that would make people talk or put me on some list. I followed leads online, cross-referenced tags, checked photos metadata where available. I re-watched videos until I could pick out the background chatter and the music that signaled certain venues. I used public posts and comments to stitch together an itinerary of the network, monthly gatherings in a warehouse space on the river, a monthly circle at an upscale bistro, private dinners booked meticulously through aliases. The more I learned, the more I realized this was less about a single man than about belonging. The faces in the photos were not furtive lovers so much as friends with a shared secret. They were a chosen family, and Maya had been living inside it. Those discoveries changed the aim of my plan. At first, I wanted to confront her and collapse her world with words. But words can be parried. Innuendo can be twisted. If I was going to make a change that was irreversible, it had to be undeniable. An unassailable truth, visible to others, would strip away plausible deniability. Public exposure, pooled with emotional weight, would hurt in ways a private fight could not. It felt savage, but also necessary. She had fashioned a life of omission. I would draw a spotlight and watch the shadows shrink. Still, I refused anything that would risk harming others or sliding into criminality. My rage was not a license to become violent or reckless. I chose methods that would expose rather than endanger. I would not destroy anyone physically. I would not set traps that could hurt the uninvolved. The measure of my revenge would be humiliation, the shattering of facades, the cold, slow unspooling of a lie before a keen, judging world. I began collecting witnesses in small, careful ways. An old co-worker she'd never mentioned responded to a message I sent. Careful, measured, and over a coffee confessed that they'd once suspected something but chalked it up to privacy. A woman in a forum for event planners, contacted under pretense of needing a venue, gave me a politely guarded list of clients. Some names matched ones I'd seen in photos. Each conversation required a mask. I couldn't afford to reveal what I knew until I knew enough to make exposure clean and absolute. In the days that followed, I watched Maya perform her duality with an almost clinical interest. She was tender with me in private, often slipping her hand into mine at dinner, resting her head against my shoulder with a sigh that used to settle my ribs. Those gestures now felt like acts in a play. Sometimes, in the hush of the apartment, I would watch her sleep and feel an ache that no plan could soothe, love and hatred braided together into something that kept me awake. Other times, when she laughed a particular laugh on the phone, soft, close to the ear, I imagined her mouth forming the same vowels for someone else, and my body reacted with a hot, animal anger. I drew up scenarios. What would happen if I compiled the photos, the messages, the dates, and made them public? How would her circle react? Would they ostracize her, or close ranks? Would friends curdle into strangers? I pictured the slow cascade, a public post, a curated package delivered to people who mattered, the parent who adored her, the colleagues who relied on her, the mutual friend who saw only what she chose them to see. The humiliation would not be instantaneous. It would be surgical, unfolding in carefully timed reveals that allowed for no plausible deniability. But there was also the other shape of revenge that untethered me, reclaiming dignity. I wanted to show not only what she had done, but the person she had been to me. I wrote a letter, not a rant, but a measured narrative, detailing the smallest things, the sleepless nights I'd held her when the storms of life were loudest, the hospital visits I'd sat through, the scent of her hair when she'd lean on my chest at 3 a.m. The letter would be my truth, a counterweight to the curated images. It was meant for both of us, for her to read and for everyone else to see that there had been a construction of it all, of us, that she had dismantled. The letter was not vengeance for vengeance's sake. It was a reclamation of memory. Late at night, in the faint glow of the study lamp, I rehearsed how I would deliver the package of proof. I would not go to her friends first. I would not suffer from second-hand incredulity. Instead, I would assemble everything into a single, undeniable narrative, images, screenshots, dates, my letter, and release it directly where it could not be contained, online, to a thread that will be indexed, archived, immutable. I told myself this was fair. She had chosen secrecy and silence. I chose daylight, but the planning also revealed darker undercurrents. I found myself contemplating things that surprised me. What if strangers turned this into theater? What if the world, capable of both mercy and cruelty, decided to make a spectacle of her in ways I could not control? My hands would shake at the thought of it. I had wanted to reclaim dignity, not demolish a life beyond repair. There were consequences I could not predict, people I could not foresee. The rationalizing voice inside me, the one that justified everything as necessary, wrestled with a quieter, softer voice asking whether there was another way. I decided to add contingencies. If disclosure would cripple her beyond any chance of dialogue, I would reconsider. If exposure caused collateral damage to innocence, names, faces who had merely been acquaintances, I would redact. The plan hardened into a thing with edges and protections. My sense of justice, however warped by pain, still had limits. On the night I finally stitched the first batch of evidence together, photos ordered chronologically, messages annotated, my letter attached, I felt a potent mix of triumph and dread. It was too late to turn back. The work existed in pixels and paper now, a living thing that could be sent, shared, saved. I understood finally that revenge is not clean. It stains. It changes a person who wields it as much as a target. I sat in the dark and listened to the city breathe. Below our window, the river glittered like a wound of light. Somewhere in the night, a siren wailed and dissolved. I traced the outline of my plan in the notebook, then closed it, sliding it into a drawer and locking it for the first time in my life. The lock clicked, a small, private sound that felt like the beginning of something irreversible. Love had been the foundation I had built my life upon. Betrayal had hollowed it out. Revenge, I decided, would be the architecture I now used to rebuild. If not what we had been, then at least the person I could be after it. The danger, of course, was that in the rebuilding I might lay the same poisonous bricks. But at the moment when patience, rage, and meticulousness intersected, I could not see another way forward. I only knew the slow, deliberate path ahead, and that I would walk it alone. The morning I decided to move, the air had that brittle clarity of late autumn, the sky hard and washed out, like a photograph bleached of sentiment. Maya left for work with her usual grace, planting a kiss on my cheek that felt mechanical, rehearsed. I watched the brief tremor in her lips vanish as she stepped into the corridor and closed the door. For a moment I considered calling her back, shouting the truth into the hallway like a siren. Instead, I let the silence collect in the apartment like dust. The plan I had written and rewritten a dozen times, then stiffened into a single course of action, felt exacting and inevitable. I had coaxed my evidence into a neat chronology, photos, dates, locations, screenshots annotated with the names she used and the aliases others had adopted. My letter, the one that mapped tenderness and betrayal in equal measure, sat sealed in an envelope, addressed to everyone who mattered, her parents, her closest friends, a curated list of colleagues and acquaintances, and a public post destined for a social thread I knew would remain searchable forever. I had debated doing it at night, when the world is quiet and fewer people notice, but that felt petty. I wanted daylight, sharp, honest sunlight that left no corners for excuse. Before I clicked send on anything, I made two small, human preparations. I brewed coffee the way she liked it, dark, no sugar, and cut a slice of the lemon cake she loved, then placed both on a tray. I set the tray on the table in our kitchen and left a note, folded neatly. We need to talk. Tonight, 8 p.m. No accusation, no fury, just the barest invitation that would make her show up. It would be enough. Confrontation in private after the public would have felt like cowardice. She deserved to see what everyone else would see and then face me. But first, daylight. I scheduled the public release for noon. I created an account under a neutral name, one that could not be traced easily to me, because revenge, I decided, required distance as well as delivery. Then, with hands steadier than I felt, I uploaded the first batch, 24 photos, each captioned with dates and notes, a string of messages that were unmistakable, and my letter in full. I clicked publish and felt my throat seize. The world did not drop away. It only continued, indifferent and small. People I did not know saw a piece of my life and began to read. Within minutes, the post received the first trickle of responses, an emoji, a curt question from a stranger. Within an hour, it seeded into circles I had not expected. People tagged who knew her, mutual friends who had once liked her photos, colleagues who worked in the same office blocks. The velocity surprised me. Human curiosity is a tide. Once it finds the first leak, it floods without shame. My chest tightened as notifications multiplied. My hands hovered over the phone, waiting for the first reaction. By 11:30, I had prepared physical copies. I printed copies of the dossier and wrote short, simple notes to accompany each packet. You should know. A small, tidy cruelty seemed necessary, facts in hand, uncluttered by my anger. I left a packet at her parents' doorstep, another on the windshield of a car belonging to one of her oldest friends, someone who had always been kind to me in the margins, and slipped one under the office front door so it would find its way into the hands of those who managed contact at the company where she freelanced. Each move was clinical, minimal, intended to maximize clarity and minimize spectacle. I did not want anyone hurt beyond the unavoidable sting of truth. When the first calls came, they came in a scatter. Her mother's number lit up my screen. 3 missed calls, then a voicemail I barely listened to because a tremor in her voice disarmed me more than any accusation. Is this true? Where is she? It was a single human sound that cut sharper than any photo. I listened to it twice, then 3 times, cataloging how the words broke and how the silence screamed. Guilt folded into my chest like paper. At noon, the post had taken on a life of its own. Messages arrived from strangers and acquaintances. Some were condemnatory. How could you? Others were protective, assuming I had been the one who had hurt her. A handful asked for evidence and explanations. I answered none. The dossier was the explanation. It would either speak for itself or not. I had curated it with the coldest possible honesty. Maya came home early, a look on her face I had not seen in years. Sudden, unmoored panic. Her breath hitched in the doorway. For a moment she was too stunned to speak. Then the phone in her hand vibrated with a call from her sister. It screamed bright with texts. She looked at me as if the air between us had become something dangerous and unnameable. "Did you?" she began, but the words faltered. I didn't answer immediately. I could have let the evidence do the talking. But there are moments when silence is tyranny. "I posted it," I said simply. My voice held a brittle avoidance of melodrama. It was as if saying it plainly would make it more bearable. "You what?" Her laugh cracked like glass. She set her bag down with a sound that echoed too loud in the suddenly small apartment. I watched her face change, color draining, eyes widening, fingers pressing hard into the fabric of her purse. For the first time since this began, I saw not the casual, assured woman in the photos, but someone suddenly irreparably human, vulnerable in a way that made my throat tighten. She turned the phone toward me. Notifications had multiplied into a storm. Calls, texts, posts. Her sister pleading. Her mother in shock. A forwarded message from a friend with a dossier attached. The world had condensed into that tiny, glowing rectangle. "Why?" she said finally, voice raw. Not "how could you?" Not an attack. Just a single, existential question that sought to rip the world back into a shape she could tolerate. "Because you hid it," I said. "Because you built something secret while I slept beside you. Because you chose omission over conversation. Because my throat closed. The rehearsed speech I had written the night before pooled in my mouth and turned bitter. Because I wanted you to see what it looks like when the truth goes public." Anger moved through her like a current. She laughed, then sobbed, then reached toward me as if to touch my arm and withdrew. "You could have asked me. You could have talked to me. Why make it public? Why hurt everyone?" Her words were partly accusation, partly plea. I could see the dread in her eyes, the realization that something private now belonged to everyone. I tried to understand first. I said, the honesty of it felt necessary. It was the only defense I could offer that did not sound like vindictiveness. I watched. I collected. I wanted answers. You gave none. You made your choice. Her shoulders slumped. For a heartbeat she looked small, the confident center of gatherings reduced to a trembling woman at our kitchen table. Then she leapt up, head bowed, and slammed her hand down on my dossier. Papers fanned out like wounded birds. "You monster," she hissed, but it was more sorrow than fury, an accusation shaped by grief. "You could have spoken to me." "I did speak," I said. "I spoke through evidence because you refused to speak through words." We could have fallen into recrimination, into a spiraling argument that would have ended with doors slamming and lives unmade. Instead, something quieter settled, a mutual recognition of ruin. She sat down, emptied, and at last the theater of her confidence and my composed exterior dropped away. We were two people stripped to a bone of shared history, both of us flawed, both of us now irrevocably altered. Her mother arrived within the hour, a figure of trembling grace who wrapped Maya in a hug that felt like shelter. Friends arrived with questions and accusations. Some left without speaking to me, eyes full of sorrow. Maya's sister wept in the doorway and then steadied herself in a way that made me ashamed of the role I had chosen. Not everyone needed to learn the truth in the same way, and in my decision to broadcast it, I had chosen to make strangers arbiters. When the evening fell, the apartment buzzed with visitors and whispers. Maya moved through them like a ghost, shaking hands, responding to inquiries with mechanical politeness that belied the storm inside. I watched her from the study doorway, the place that had become my map and mine alone. I had wanted exposure. I had achieved it. But the triumph I had imagined, clean, righteous, final, never arrived. Instead, there was a hollow ache, a complex tangle of justification and regret. That night, After the last person left and the apartment grew quiet, we sat across from one another at the kitchen table. Outside, the city hummed obliviously. We did not have words large enough for the things we had done. Instead, we sat in the residue of our choices, the silence full of a new, dangerous intimacy, the intimacy of two people who had been peeled open and left vulnerable to whatever came next. "You wanted control," Maya said finally, voice small. "You wanted to make me pay. And you wanted to keep a secret," I replied. "I wanted the truth to be visible. Maybe that's selfish." My voice was softer than it had been at noon. The letter I had written weeks ago sat between us in plain sight, a quiet ledger of memory and accusation. She reached for it, and I did not stop her. She read, and the apartment smelled of old paper and the faint citrus of the cake that sat half-eaten on the counter. As her eyes moved across each line, I watched her unmake herself and rebuild in gestures of apology and defense. It was messy and human, an intimate unraveling I had once thought I would cherish. But now it was too late for tenderness alone. The revenge had been executed. The world had seen. The consequences unfolded like a slow wave. Standing in the wreckage of what we had been, I recognized a truth simpler and crueler than any plan. Exposure does not heal. It complicates. It forces choices, but it does not force the right ones. And sometimes the human heart, complicated and stubborn, chooses to repair rather than to destroy. That night we did not reconcile. We did not dissolve. We sat, two figures bent by culpability and hurt, and listened to the ventilator hum. Outside, the city carried on. Inside, a life had been cleaved in two. The revenge I had planned had landed. But as sleep pulled me down, I felt the first inkling of a new unease, satisfaction and remorse braided into a single, unquiet feeling. The next movement, I realized, would not be about exposure. It would be about what we did in the aftermath. The morning after the exposure felt surreal, as if the world had shifted on its axis and left me behind. Sunlight spilled into the apartment in bright, unforgiving streams, highlighting the remnants of last night's chaos, half-eaten cake on the counter, papers scattered across the kitchen table, and the faint, lingering scent of jasmine, Maya's perfume, now tainted with a memory of deceit. I sat in the quiet, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I hadn't yet touched, staring at the documents I had unleashed upon the world. The post, the letters, the dossier, they were all out there now, circulating, public, irrevocable. The flood of messages from friends, acquaintances, and strangers had slowed but not stopped. Notifications pinged sporadically, each one a reminder of the ripple I had caused. I realized, with a chill, that I had become a participant in a narrative far larger than myself. What began as a personal act of reclamation had spread into the lives of countless others. I thought about Maya. She had retreated to her room for most of the night, emerging only briefly to speak in halting sentences with her mother and sister. Her phone buzzed incessantly, calls she could not answer and messages she could not ignore. When she finally appeared in the kitchen, she was pale, her eyes rimmed red with fatigue and tears. The confident woman who had strutted through gatherings and parties was gone, replaced by someone fragile, unsure, haunted. Her gaze met mine across the scattered papers. There was no accusation left, only the raw, unspoken acknowledgement of what had happened. I felt a twinge of something I had not anticipated, pity, or perhaps the thin edge of guilt. Even though her choices had shattered trust, the human being beneath that carefully constructed facade was still someone I had loved, still someone I had shared years with. She began, faltering. Her voice was almost a whisper. "I don't even know where to start." "You can start anywhere," I said, the words tasting bitter. "Truth first, then the rest." She sank into the chair opposite me, rubbing her temples as if trying to smooth out the jagged edges of reality. "I never wanted you to find out like this," she admitted. I don't know. I thought I was managing everything, keeping us separate, but okay. I didn't realize," her voice cracked, "I didn't realize it would hurt you this much." I stared at her, absorbing every tremor of emotion. The devastation I felt was not just about betrayal. It was about the rupture of identity, the discovery that someone I had trusted implicitly had crafted a parallel existence. And yet, as I observed her, I felt a complicated mixture of emotions, anger, yes, but also sorrow, fascination, and a strange, lingering attachment. You weren't managing anything, I said slowly. You were hiding. You built a life without me. And now the world knows. Everyone knows. The words fell heavier than I expected, weighted with both triumph and remorse. Do you understand what that means? She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes, I understand. I'm sorry. Her apology was sincere, but it was clear that the consequences she faced were larger than mere words could mend. I never meant to hurt you like this. The apartment was silent for a long stretch, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional ping of notifications from our phones. I wanted to ask more, to demand explanations, to dig into the intricate details of her network, but I realized that the immediate human connection, the conversation, the presence, was more urgent. We were two people left standing in the wreckage of choices, both battered, both changed. I felt the first pangs of moral doubt. The revenge I had planned with such meticulous care had landed as intended, yet its satisfaction was incomplete. Seeing her vulnerability, the way she shrank before me and the consequences she could not control, stirred a conflicted ache. Was this truly justice, or had I crossed a line into cruelty? The distinction blurred. My desire for retribution had been justified in my mind, but now that the moment had arrived, the emotional cost was tangible. Days stretched into a tense routine. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt charged with quiet tension. Maya moved through it cautiously, careful in her speech, measured in her actions. Our interactions were polite, even civil, but underneath was a layer of fragile distrust. Every glance carried a memory of exposure. Every touch was laced with a strange hesitancy. I realized that the intimate connection we had once shared, so effortless, so taken for granted, had been irrevocably altered. I returned to my notebook frequently, recording observations, cataloging small interactions, and tracking my own emotions. The meticulousness that had fueled my plan now served as a coping mechanism, a way to process the shifting dynamics between us. I noticed patterns in her behavior I hadn't before, the way she avoided certain topics, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the small, nervous movements of her hands. Each detail was a reminder of both her guilt and her humanity. One evening, after weeks of tense quiet, she spoke first. "I want to understand why you did it this way," she said, voice low and deliberate. "Why make it public? Why not just confront me?" I took a deep breath, considering my answer. "Because private confrontation would have been insufficient," I said finally. "You built a life in secrecy. I needed it to be undeniable, visible, and irreversible, not to punish you personally, but to reclaim the truth and make the consequences real. You were hidden. I wanted the world, and you, to see what hiding meant." Her eyes filled with tears, but there was also a flicker of recognition, a subtle nod that she understood, even if she did not agree. The weight of exposure had forced her to confront not only her actions, but also the extent of the damage they caused. In that moment, I realized that revenge was not just about me. It was also about forcing accountability, making hidden choices visible. Yet even as I recognized the necessity of what I had done, I could not escape the emotional fallout. I had anticipated anger, grief, and a sense of justice, but the persistent ache of human attachment lingered. Love and betrayal, intertwined, created a tension that I could neither resolve nor ignore. Seeing her remorse, the vulnerability I had stripped away with exposure, forced me to confront a new truth. Revenge does not heal. It complicates. It reveals layers of emotion previously unexamined, and it leaves scars that are not easily mended. In the days that followed, we navigated this delicate terrain cautiously. Conversations were measured, actions deliberate. Trust, once shattered, was now a fragile experiment, tested by small interactions and quiet gestures. I observed her, not with suspicion but with curiosity, a careful examination of how a person rebuilds after exposure, how guilt manifests in habits and speech, how accountability can shape behavior in subtle, unexpected ways. There were moments when the old intimacy flickered, a shared cup of coffee, a tentative joke, a glance that lingered just a little too long. But those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the larger reality of what had transpired. The revenge had been executed. The truth had been revealed. The consequences were now alive in our shared world. And yet, beneath the tension, beneath the quiet reckoning, there was a strange, unspoken understanding. We were both irrevocably altered, bound by shared history and the profound impact of secrecy and exposure. Our relationship, if it could be called that, existed now in a space shaped by both betrayal and accountability, by both love and its shadow. As I sat alone one evening, reviewing the last messages, the last photos, and the careful notes I had kept, I realized that the most enduring lesson of revenge was not satisfaction. It was clarity. I knew who she had been, who she was, and the role I had played in reclaiming my own agency. The exposure had revealed truths that could not be undone, and in that revelation, I found a fragile equilibrium. Revenge, I understood finally, was not about closure. It was about confrontation with reality. And reality, no matter how painful or complex, demanded recognition, reflection, and, eventually, a reckoning with the self. The apartment was quiet, the city outside pulsing faintly with life indifferent to our private storm. I sipped the now-cold coffee, the taste bitter but grounding. I had executed my plan. I had reclaimed the truth. And yet, I was left with a hollow space where certainty once had been, a space that demanded introspection, patience, and the slow, deliberate reconstruction of trust, understanding, and perhaps, eventually, forgiveness. The apartment felt different in the mornings now. Sunlight no longer streamed as sharply, and the air had taken on a weight, a heaviness that mirrored the tension between us. We moved through routines with cautious precision, coffee poured with deliberate pauses, dishes washed in silence, footsteps measured to avoid collisions. The intimacy of shared life had shifted. The familiarity that once brought comfort now carried reminders of betrayal, exposure, and the irrevocable consequences of our choices. Yet life insisted on continuing. Work demanded attention, the city pressing with its indifference, and the world outside our apartment went on without pause. In that continuity, we began to find small openings, moments of connection that had been impossible in the immediacy of shock and anger. A shared glance across the table, a faint smile during a conversation, the quiet ritual of preparing a meal together. These moments were fragile, easily shattered, but they were the first threads in a tentative reconstruction. Maya was quieter now, introspective in ways that were unfamiliar. She spent long stretches reading, walking alone, or sitting by the window with her phone ignored. When we spoke, it was deliberate, careful, each word measured as if it could cut or heal depending on its precision. The confidence she had carried so effortlessly through the secret world she had inhabited was gone, replaced by a vulnerability that was both disarming and painful to witness. "I'm trying to understand," she said one evening, her voice low, hesitant. "Not just the exposure, but myself. How I ended up living like that, hiding, deceiving. I don't know if I'll ever make sense of it." I nodded, stirring the coffee in my mug, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. "Understanding is a first step," I said, "but it's only the first. You need to face the choices, the consequences, and the people you affected. And so do I." The days passed in a delicate rhythm, punctuated by small acts of trust, sharing news, leaving notes, checking in when we were apart. Each act was a negotiation, an unspoken agreement to move forward without pretending that the past had not happened. I noticed subtle changes in myself, too. My anger, once a raw and guiding force, had settled into a quiet awareness. I was learning to separate the person she had been from the person she was trying to become, even as I remained acutely aware of the scars she had left behind. One evening, we sat together on the couch, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of a lamp. The dossier, the letter, the photos, they still existed, but they were tucked away, no longer a daily presence. Maya reached for my hand, hesitating, then gripping it gently. The gesture was cautious, measured, but it carried weight. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I deserve it, but I want to try, to rebuild, even if it's just a little at a time." I studied her, noticing the tremor in her fingers, the tightness in her jaw, the way her eyes avoided mine before finally meeting them. There was honesty in her vulnerability, a rawness that was both compelling and painful. "Rebuilding is a process," I said carefully. "It's not about forgetting. It's about understanding accountability and maybe creating something new from the pieces left behind." She nodded, a faint, tentative smile breaking through. It was the first real smile I had seen in weeks, one that felt unguarded, even if fragile. In that moment, the apartment seemed less like a battlefield and more like a space of possibility, a place where we could attempt to navigate the complex terrain of trust, betrayal, and human connection. The process was slow. We had conversations that stretched late into the night, dissecting choices, motivations, and fears. We revisited moments from the past, not to assign blame, but to understand the patterns that had led us to this rupture. It was uncomfortable, often painful, but necessary. The truth, once exposed, demanded confrontation in all its forms, emotional, psychological, and practical. I observed her with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. The ease with which she had once navigated her secret world was gone, replaced by careful consideration of her actions. She had become more reflective, more attuned to the consequences of her choices. Yet the shadow of the past lingered, manifesting in small hesitations, fleeting glances at her phone, and the occasional pause mid-sentence as if weighing every word before speaking. Trust, I realized, was not a single act but a series of negotiations, small, deliberate gestures that accumulated over time. Each moment of honesty, each shared decision, each acknowledgement of past mistakes was a brick in a structure we were rebuilding together. The process was neither linear nor guaranteed. Setbacks occurred, frustrations flared, and the temptation to retreat into old patterns was ever present. One afternoon, I discovered an unexpected layer of complexity, empathy. Watching her navigate the aftermath of exposure, fielding calls, responding to messages, confronting friends and family, revealed the humanity behind the betrayal. She was not a one-dimensional figure of deceit. She was flawed, fallible, and capable of reflection and growth. My own emotions mirrored this complexity. Anger still existed, but it was tempered by understanding, sorrow, and a cautious hope that reconciliation, however tenuous, was possible. We began small rituals to re-establish connection. Shared meals without screens, walks in the park where conversation flowed without judgment, and evenings spent in quiet companionship rather than silent observation. These moments were fragile, yet each one was a testament to the possibility of rebuilding, to the idea that even fractured trust could be repaired incrementally. Maya also took steps independently. She reached out to people affected by her choices, offering apologies, explanations, and efforts to make amends. It was awkward, uncomfortable, and often met with skepticism, but it demonstrated a willingness to face consequences beyond our apartment. Observing this, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering caution. Reconciliation required effort from both sides, and her actions signaled commitment to that effort. Our conversations increasingly included reflections on morality, consequence, and personal growth. We discussed the nature of secrecy, the psychological need for belonging, and the ways in which human desires can conflict with ethical responsibility. These discussions were neither easy nor comfortable, but they fostered a sense of mutual understanding and intellectual intimacy that had been absent in the weeks of raw confrontation. At night, when the apartment grew quiet, we occasionally spoke of the future, not in grand terms, but in small, manageable ways, plans for meals, shared tasks, and gestures of consideration. These moments of planning, seemingly mundane, became acts of trust and reconnect ion. They were reminders that rebuilding a relationship after profound betrayal required attention to detail, patience, and a willingness to accept imperfection. Despite progress, I remained aware of the fragility underlying every interaction. The memory of exposure and betrayal was never far from the surface, shaping responses, coloring interpretations, and influencing decisions. Yet the very awareness of this fragility allowed for deliberate, thoughtful engagement, a conscious choice to navigate the complexities rather than ignore them. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Maya spoke quietly. "I don't expect everything to go back to the way it was," she said. "I just want to try to build something honest from here." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "That's all anyone can ask," I replied. "We can't undo the past, but we can decide what comes next. And we have to be honest every step of the way." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel a tentative sense of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential missteps and emotional turbulence, but it existed. We were two people, irrevocably altered by betrayal and exposure, yet still capable of connection, empathy, and the slow work of rebuilding trust. As the evening deepened into night, the apartment settled into a quiet rhythm. The dossier and letters remained stored away, reminders of choices made and lessons learned. Maya and I, sitting side by side yet still navigating the distance between us, acknowledged the fragile bridge we were constructing. It was not a bridge built on illusion, denial, or false comfort. It was a bridge forged in the heat of exposure, tempered by accountability, and strengthened by a cautious commitment to rebuild. And in that quiet, tenuous space, I realized the profound truth of our situation. Reconciliation, after such profound betrayal, is neither swift nor guaranteed. It is a deliberate, ongoing process, demanding honesty, empathy, and patience. And even as we navigated this delicate terrain, the memory of exposure, the shadow of betrayal, and the lessons of revenge lingered, shaping every step, every word, and every gesture. Weeks passed, and the fragile equilibrium we had established began to reveal its tensions. The initial shock of exposure had faded, replaced by the subtle, gnawing reality of living with betrayal. Trust, I learned, was not a switch to be flipped. It was a series of moments, some small, some devastating, in which the choice to believe someone had to be made over and over again. And each decision carried the risk of disappointment, or worse, renewed devastation. I watched Maya move through the days with the careful precision I had come to expect. She no longer laughed carelessly at my jokes, nor did she brush lightly against my arm. There was a constant awareness in her gestures, a measured caution born from knowledge of the rupture that had occurred. She would sometimes linger over a message on her phone, eyes narrowing, a shadow of thought passing across her features. I had long since stopped prying, realizing that curiosity unchecked could undo the tenuous trust we were attempting to rebuild. One evening, I found myself alone in the study, staring at a collection of evidence that had once been the weapon of my revenge. The dossier, neatly bound, sat on the desk like a relic of war. Each photograph, each message, each carefully annotated note reminded me of the magnitude of her betrayal. And yet, for all the meticulous planning, the strategic execution, and the sense of retribution, a hollow ache lingered. Satisfaction, it seemed, was an illusion. Exposure had given me control, but it had not healed the wound. It had not answered the questions that burned in my chest. Why had she done it? What did it mean about the woman I had loved? And perhaps most painfully, what did it mean about me, the man who had orchestrated her downfall? Maya entered the room quietly, the soft click of the door breaking the silence. She paused at the threshold, then stepped closer, hands folded in front of her. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice low and tentative. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Of course." She sat, and for a moment we regarded each other in silence, the weight of months pressing down between us. Then she spoke, carefully, deliberately. "I've been thinking about everything. About why I did what I did, about how I hid things, and about how it affected you. I don't have all the answers, but I want to try to understand myself better. I want to face it, not just for you, but for me." Her words struck me with an odd mixture of relief and unease. Relief, because acknowledgement is a first step toward accountability. Unease, because acknowledgement also requires confrontation. Confrontation with truths that are uncomfortable, even unbearable. I realized that while my revenge had exposed her actions to the world, it had not fully revealed the emotional truths that lay beneath them, complex motivations, fears, and insecurities that had driven her choices. "I appreciate that," I said slowly. "Understanding is hard. Confronting yourself is even harder. But it's necessary if we're going to move forward, if we even have the chance to rebuild anything." She nodded, eyes fixed on a point beyond the room, as if the distance offered clarity. "I think part of why I hid things was fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of losing the life I had built with you. Fear of disappointing people I cared about. I never imagined it would spiral like this, that it would hurt you so deeply." I felt a sharp pang of empathy, tinged with lingering resentment. The fear she described was real, tangible, and human, but it did not erase the deception, the betrayal, or the careful construction of a secret life. "Fear explains it," I said, "but it doesn't excuse it. You made choices that shattered trust, and now we have to live with that reality." The conversation unfolded slowly, a delicate negotiation of honesty, anger, and reflection. We discussed the nature of secrecy, the allure of hidden worlds, and the human tendency to compartmentalize desires. Maya spoke candidly about the thrill and validation she had found in her clandestine network, admitting that it had provided a sense of belonging and excitement she felt was missing in other aspects of life. I listened, absorbing the nuances of her perspective, even as the bitterness of betrayal lingered in my chest. "You weren't enough," I asked quietly, needing to hear the words aloud. She shook her head, eyes glistening. "It wasn't about you. It was about me, about a void I didn't understand, a need I couldn't articulate. I know it sounds selfish. I know it hurt you, and I hate that it did." The honesty in her voice cut deeper than anger ever could. It revealed a truth I had not anticipated. Betrayal is rarely simple. It is layered, complex, often intertwined with insecurities, desires, and unmet needs. And in that complexity, forgiveness becomes an equally intricate dance, an attempt to reconcile love with pain, trust with violation, hope with disillusionment. I felt the full weight of my own emotions, the residual anger, the lingering grief, the cautious hope, and an unexpected sense of compassion. I realized that revenge, while satisfying in a tactical sense, had not addressed the deeper emotional truths, the vulnerabilities, fears, and insecurities that had shaped both of our actions. The exposure had been necessary, perhaps even justified, but it was not sufficient for healing. "We're both flawed," I said finally. "We made mistakes. I took revenge because I felt powerless, but now we had to confront the deeper truths. Not just yours, but mine too." She looked at me, eyes wide, searching, perhaps for absolution or perhaps for shared recognition of our mutual culpability. "I want to try," she said softly. "I want to understand. I want to rebuild, even if it takes everything we have left." And in that moment, I understood the enormity of what lay ahead. Rebuilding trust after profound betrayal is not a linear process. It requires patience, empathy, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. It demands acknowledgement of both actions and emotions, the courage to face pain without retreating, and the resilience to navigate setbacks without giving up. We began small. Conversations about the past, reflections on choices, and shared moments of vulnerability became daily practices. We revisited memories, not to assign blame, but to understand patterns, motivations, and consequences. Each discussion was emotionally taxing, yet it fostered a sense of connection, however fragile, that had been absent in the immediate aftermath of exposure. We also addressed the practical consequences of our actions, the strained relationships, the fallout with friends and family, and the social ramifications of public exposure. Maya took steps to make amends, reaching out with sincerity and humility to those affected. Her efforts were imperfect, met with skepticism, yet they demonstrated a commitment to accountability that was essential for any hope of reconciliation. I observed, guided, and sometimes withheld judgment, recognizing that forgiveness is not immediate, nor is it guaranteed. It is earned through consistent actions, transparency, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. And as I watched and navigate this terrain, I began to see the contours of a relationship reshaped by honesty, reflection, and the shared effort to rebuild trust from the ruins of betrayal. Yet even as we made progress, shadows lingered. Memories of exposure, the betrayal, and the strategic execution of revenge remained ever present, coloring interactions and shaping perceptions. I felt the tension between satisfaction and regret, between control and vulnerability, and between the desire for justice and the need for compassion. These contradictions were not easily resolved, and they required constant negotiation, reflection, and emotional labor. One night, as we sat together in silence, I realized that reconciliation is not a destination but a continuous journey. It is an ongoing process of confronting truths, acknowledging emotions, and making deliberate choices to rebuild trust. The past cannot be undone, but the present and future can be navigated with awareness, empathy, and intentionality. Maya rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of tentative calm. The scars of betrayal were still there, etched into memory and emotion, yet the possibility of rebuilding existed. It was fragile, uncertain, and fraught with challenges, but it was real. And in that quiet, Shared space. I understood the profound complexity of human relationships, the interplay of desire and fear, love and betrayal, revenge and reconciliation. I realized that true emotional reckoning requires confronting these contradictions, acknowledging vulnerability, and committing to a path of reflection, accountability, and gradual restoration. The journey ahead would be long, uncertain, and emotionally demanding. But as I felt Maya's presence beside me, I also felt the first glimmers of hope, that from the ruins of betrayal and the aftermath of revenge, a new understanding, a new connection, and a renewed sense of trust could emerge. The weeks of cautious rebuilding passed like slow-moving clouds, each day revealing small victories, small betrayals of the past, and small gestures of understanding. Maya and I had established routines that were deliberate, almost ritualistic, meals together at the same time, nightly conversations about the day, and quiet moments in shared spaces where words were optional. Yet beneath the veneer of restored civility, there remained an unspoken tension, a silent acknowledgement that trust, once fractured, could never fully return to its original state. I had begun to feel a cautious optimism, a sense that we might emerge from this period of reckoning with some semblance of connection intact. And yet, as anyone who has navigated betrayal knows, the human psyche is rarely linear. Past sins, even when confronted and accounted for, leave traces, like faint echoes in the corridors of memory that can be triggered unexpectedly. The twist came unexpectedly, as all the most profound revelations often do. One evening, I returned from work earlier than usual. The apartment was silent, unnervingly so. Maya was not in the kitchen where she usually lingered, nor in the living room where she often read. A subtle unease settled in my chest. I followed a faint trail of movement toward the study and found her there, hunched over my laptop, eyes wide with shock and confusion. The screen glowed with an open email, one I had not sent, one I had not even drafted. My pulse quickened. "Maya," I asked cautiously, "what is that?" She jumped slightly, as if caught in the act of trespassing, though the expression on her face was more fear than guilt. I don't know," she stammered. "It just appeared. I thought it was a draft, but it's not." I stepped closer, heart pounding. The email header read clearly, "To all recipients of the dossier and public post, confidential follow-up." My stomach tightened. Whoever had intercepted the documents, or perhaps used the chaos I had unleashed, was sending an ominous message. This story is not over. I read the body of the email with a growing sense of disbelief. It contained details about my own life, carefully curated observations that only someone with intimate knowledge could have collected. The sender remained anonymous, yet the tone was unmistakable, measured, calculated, and threatening in subtle ways. Every line revealed insights into my routines, habits, and vulnerabilities. It was clear that someone had been watching. Not Maya, not a stranger, but someone who had access to the same hidden network that she once navigated. Maya's hand trembled as she pointed to the screen. "I swear, I didn't." "I know," I interrupted softly, though my mind raced. "This isn't you, but it's connected to the people you were involved with. They've noticed, I think, or maybe they've taken an interest." The realization hit me like ice in the veins. The revenge I had orchestrated, the exposure I had meticulously planned, had not only revealed Maya's secrets, but had also drawn attention from a broader, unseen network. Individuals who thrived in secrecy, who traded in manipulation and control, were now aware of me. My life, my carefully reconstructed routines, was suddenly exposed to scrutiny beyond anything I had anticipated. Maya's eyes filled with tears, and I felt a pang of protectiveness. Despite a betrayal, despite everything that had transpired, she was still vulnerable, still human, still capable of fear and regret. "What do we do?" she asked, voice small, almost childlike. "We adapt," I said slowly. "We take control of what we can and anticipate what we cannot. We cannot undo the past, but we can navigate the present, and we will do it together, or not at all." The days that followed were tense, charged with a mixture of fear, strategy, and unexpected camaraderie. We strengthened digital security, changed routines, and established clear boundaries for communication. What had begun as a personal act of revenge now expanded into a joint effort for survival, a collaboration that demanded trust, vigilance, and mutual reliance. Through this crisis, something remarkable happened. Maya, who had once been the architect of secrets, became my partner in uncovering them. Her knowledge of hidden networks, her understanding of subtle manipulations, proved invaluable. In an ironic twist of fate, the skills that had once betrayed me now became tools for our shared protection. And in that strange inversion, we found an unexpected bond. Two people shaped by betrayal, now united in purpose, navigating the precarious line between vigilance and paranoia. One night, after a particularly tense day, we sat together in the living room, a stack of screens and documents between us. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the occasional ping of incoming alerts. Maya leaned against my shoulder, a gesture of trust and surrender, and whispered, "I never imagined that what we built from ashes could be used for something like this." I held her hand, feeling the warmth and fragility in her grip. "Life is a way of teaching lessons we don't anticipate," I said. "Sometimes the consequences of our actions extend far beyond what we imagine, but it's how we respond that defines us." The weeks stretched into months. The immediate threat of exposure gradually dissipated, thanks to our vigilance and proactive measures. The broader network, it seemed, had moved on, leaving us to contend with the quieter, subtler challenges of trust, connection, and emotional healing. The experience had left its mark. Scars visible only to us, lessons etched into the rhythms of our interactions, and a profound awareness of the complexity of human behavior. Through it all, our relationship evolved. The veneer of reconciliation became genuine connection, tempered by honesty and accountability. We learned to navigate the delicate interplay of vulnerability and boundaries, to confront uncomfortable truths without resorting to secrecy, and to rebuild trust in increments, mindful of the fragility inherent in such efforts. And yet, even in this fragile peace, the memory of betrayal and exposure lingered. We could never truly return to the simplicity of the past, nor would we want to. The twists and revelations had reshaped us, forced us to confront the deepest layers of our personalities, and challenged us to integrate the lessons of fear, anger, and vulnerability into a coherent understanding of ourselves and each other. In the final weeks of this journey, I realized profound truth. Revenge, exposure, and confrontation may reveal the depth of betrayal, but they do not complete the story. The ultimate resolution lies in the ongoing work of understanding, empathy, and deliberate choice, the decision to navigate the messy, imperfect terrain of human connection with awareness, patience, and courage. Maya and I, sitting together in the quiet apartment, understood this implicitly. We had faced exposure, betrayal, and external threats. We had confronted truths about ourselves and each other that were uncomfortable and humbling. And yet, in the shared effort to rebuild, protect, and understand, we discovered a new form of connection, a bond forged not in simplicity or innocence, but in the resilience, vulnerability, and complexity that define human relationships. As the night deepened and the city hummed outside, we sat in silence, hands intertwined, aware of the fragility and strength of the life we were attempting to reconstruct. The final twist had tested us, revealed our vulnerabilities, and reshaped the narrative of our lives. But it had also provided an unexpected clarity. The most profound resolutions are not dramatic acts of retribution or exposure, but the quiet, deliberate, and ongoing choices to confront truth, navigate complexity, and remain present in the shared space of human connection. And in that quiet, tenuous peace, I understood the ultimate resolution of our story. It was not about victory or revenge, nor about punishment or absolution. It was about surviving the consequences of choices, embracing accountability, and discovering the resilience to build something real and meaningful from the fragments of betrayal, exposure, and human imperfection. The months that followed the final confrontation passed in a rhythm of careful normalcy. The external threat had subsided, leaving only the traces of our own emotional landscapes, scarred but resilient. The apartment, once a theater of betrayal and exposure, became a laboratory of understanding, a place where we experimented with trust, connection, and accountability. Each day offered the possibility of progress and the risk of regression, and the balance between the two was delicate, often precarious, but undeniably real. I found myself reflecting on the nature of betrayal. It was not a single act, nor merely a violation of trust. Betrayal was layered, nuanced, entwined with fear, desire, and human imperfection. It revealed hidden motivations and obscure truths, not only about the one who betrayed, but about the one who was betrayed. In my case, I discovered reservoirs of patience, restraint, and reflection I had not known I possessed, tempered by anger, grief, and lingering doubt. Each emotion, raw and unfiltered, had contributed to a deeper understanding of myself and of Maya. Maya, too, had changed. The confident, secretive woman who had orchestrated clandestine connections and hidden worlds had become someone more grounded, reflective, and mindful. The consequences of her actions were a constant presence, but they also became catalysts for growth. She spoke openly about her past mistakes, confronted lingering fears, and demonstrated a commitment to rebuild trust not only with me but with a broader circle of people affected by her choices. Her vulnerability was no longer a liability. It had become a bridge, fragile yet significant, connecting past remorse with present effort. We continued the rituals that had become the backbone of our tentative reconciliation: shared meals, deliberate conversations, small acts of consideration, and quiet moments of presence. These routines were not grand gestures, but incremental steps, each reinforcing a fragile but growing foundation of trust. Even in moments of tension, when past grievances threatened to resurface, we approached each other with honesty rather than avoidance, learning to navigate conflict without resorting to secrecy or manipulation. One evening, as the city outside hummed with indifferent activity, we sat together in the living room. The soft glow of the lamp illuminated the space, casting shadows that mirrored the complexity of our shared history. I took a deep breath, reflecting on how far we had come, not merely in the practical sense, but emotionally and psychologically. The scars of betrayal remained, etched into memory and behavior, but they had ceased to dominate the narrative of our lives. Maya, I said quietly, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. The betrayal, the exposure, the revenge, and now, us. It's strange. I don't feel the same anger I did at first, though the memory of it is sharp. What I feel now is understanding, I think, and perhaps something like gratitude in a twisted way. She looked at me, eyes reflecting the soft light and something deeper, recognition, relief, and cautious hope. Gratitude, she echoed, a faint smile tugging at her lips. For what? For the clarity, I said, for the confrontation with truth, for forcing both of us to face part of ourselves we might never have acknowledged otherwise. It's strange, but in a way, the betrayal and the exposure, they led us to this point, to a place where honesty and understanding are possible. She reached for my hand, interlacing fingers with mine. I never imagined that from all the pain we could find something real, but I do feel it. I feel the possibility of something honest, built from the wreckage, rather than pretending the past didn't exist. The truth settled between us, quiet but potent. Reconciliation, I realized, was not about erasing the past. It was about integrating it, confronting its consequences, and making deliberate choices to move forward. It was about accepting imperfection, both in ourselves and in each other, and finding the courage to navigate life with eyes open, even when the terrain was jagged and uncertain. In the following weeks, we began to envision the future with cautious optimism. Discussions about long-term plans, living arrangements, career goals, shared responsibilities, were grounded in honesty rather than avoidance. The lessons of betrayal had informed our decision-making, shaping priorities, expectations, and boundaries. We had learned that trust is not a static state but a dynamic process, requiring attention, reflection, and deliberate action. One afternoon, as we walked through a quiet park, I noticed the subtle shifts in our interaction. Laughter returned, not forced or performative, but spontaneous, emerging from shared understanding and presence. Conversations flowed with a natural rhythm, punctuated by moments of reflection, insight, and playful teasing. The intensity of past betrayal had not disappeared, but it had transformed into a lens through which we could view ourselves and each other more clearly. Maya paused to watch a child playing nearby, the sunlight catching her hair in a way that reminded me of the fragile beauty and imperfection. "Do you think we'll ever forget?" she asked softly, almost to herself. "No," I replied, "and I don't think we should. Forgetting would mean denying reality. What we've been through, every betrayal, every confrontation, every moment of fear and understanding, it's part of who we are now. But remembering doesn't have to mean pain. It can mean awareness, growth, and the ability to choose differently moving forward. She nodded, leaning slightly against me. I hope so, she said. I hope we can continue to grow from it rather than be defined by it. And in that moment, I realized the profound truth of our journey. Life, relationships, and human connection are rarely linear. Betrayal and revenge, exposure and confrontation, grief and reflection, they are not merely obstacles or punishments. They are catalysts for self-awareness, empathy, and transformation. The ultimate resolution does not lie in retribution or absolution, but in a deliberate, ongoing choice to confront truth, embrace vulnerability, and navigate the complexities of connection with courage and honesty. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in shades of gold and violet, I felt a sense of closure that was neither absolute nor final. It was a closure built on understanding rather than denial, acceptance rather than resentment, and a commitment to continue the work of connection even when it was difficult. Maya's presence beside me, steady and cautious, symbolized a fragile but tangible possibility of rebuilding, a life informed by truth, shaped by consequence, and enriched by the resilience of human emotion. The journey from betrayal to resolution had been long, arduous, and emotionally taxing. But in its wake, it left something more enduring than revenge or exposure: awareness, growth, and capacity for meaningful connection. The past was never forgotten, but it was integrated into a larger narrative of learning, reflection, and deliberate choice. As night settled over the apartment, we remained side by side, hands intertwined, comfortable in silence. The weight of history, the lessons of betrayal, and the clarity born from confrontation created a space that was neither simple nor perfect, but profoundly real. In that space, I understood the ultimate lesson. The human heart is resilient, capable of navigating the deepest wounds, the most complex truths, and the most challenging moral landscapes, emerging with awareness, understanding, and a fragile but genuine hope for the future. And as we sat together, the quiet of the night enveloping us, I realized that the story, our story, was not defined by betrayal, revenge, or exposure. It was defined by what came after: the courage to confront truth, the willingness to rebuild, and the capacity to find connection, even in the shadow of human imperfection.